I never thought a simple walk with my dog in the dead of night would change everything. But that night, something happened. Something I can never forget. And now I have to share it with you. Stay with me till the end, because you won't believe what unfolded. The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:13 a.m. The world outside was wrapped in silence except for the occasional rustling of the wind against my window. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. I don't know why, but something felt off, like an unseen presence was lurking just beyond the walls of my home, watching. I turned my head and saw Orion, my dog, curled up at my feet. His slow breathing was the only thing grounding me. But then, he lifted his head, ears twitching. His eyes flickered toward the door. "What's wrong, buddy?" I whispered. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just stared at the door, unmoving, his body tense. A chill ran down my spine. Orion was a calm dog, never anxious, never scared. If he was acting this way, something wasn't right. I pushed the covers off and swung my legs over the bed. The floor was cold beneath my feet. Maybe fresh air would help clear my mind. I grabbed Orion's leash, and the moment I clipped it onto his collar, he stood up, alert and ready. It was as if he had been waiting for this. I should have questioned it. I should have turned back. But I didn't. The walk begins. The street was eerily silent, the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every sound, your own footsteps, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of streetlights. The air was cold, and I pulled my hoodie tighter around me. Orion trotted beside me, his tail still, his ears flicking at every little noise. Normally he'd be wagging his tail, excited to be outside. But tonight he was focused, watching. We walked past houses, their windows dark. The whole neighborhood was asleep. A few blocks away was a small park, nothing but a patch of trees and an old bench. I had walked this route dozens of times before, but tonight it felt different. As we approached the park, Orion stopped. His body stiffened, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. I followed his gaze, scanning the darkened area ahead. Then I saw it. A figure. Standing just at the edge of the trees, not moving, not blinking, my breath caught in my throat. My mind raced to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was a late-night jogger, a homeless person, a trick of the shadows. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The feeling of being watched, Orion let out a low, uneasy growl. The hairs on my arms stood up. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around. But I couldn't move. My feet were frozen to the ground. Then the figure moved. A slow, deliberate step forward. I sucked in a sharp breath, my heart slamming against my ribs. The dim streetlight barely illuminated them, but I could tell they were tall, too tall. Their posture was unnatural, slightly hunched, like something trying to mimic a human, but failing. Orion barked, a deep, warning sound that echoed through the empty streets. The figure stopped, just stood there, watching. I tightened my grip on Orion's leash, my palms slick with sweat. My voice was barely above a whisper. "Who's there?" No answer, no movement, just silence. Then, out of nowhere, a whisper. So soft I almost thought I imagined it. "Don't go any further." A cold shudder ran through my body. My legs finally obeyed me, and I took a step back. Orion growled louder, his body tense, ready to pounce. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I yanked on Orion's leash, turned and ran. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it. Something was behind me. Orion's paws pounded against the pavement. His leash gripped tightly in my shaking hand. My heartbeat roared in my ears, drowning out everything else. The cold night air burned my lungs, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. We reached the nearest street lamp, and for a split second I risked a glance over my shoulder. Nothing. The park was empty. No shadowy figure, no movement, just darkness. Had I imagined it? My breathing was ragged, my skin clammy. Maybe it was the lack of sleep messing with my head. Maybe I was overreacting. But then I saw Orion. His body was still rigid, his tail tucked low. He wasn't barking anymore. He was listening. That's when I heard it again. A whisper. But this time, right behind me. "Why did you run?" My body turned before my brain could stop it. The street was empty. The park was empty. There was no one there. But I swore, for a split second, I saw something just outside the reach of the streetlight. A flicker of movement. A shape that wasn't quite human. Orion let out a low whimper, pressing against my leg. I swallowed hard. We had to leave. The feeling that won't go away, I hurried home, Orion close beside me. My hands were ice cold, but my back was on fire, like something was watching me. Every few steps I stole a glance over my shoulder. Every time the street was empty. But the unease didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. I reached my front door and fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking. The moment I stepped inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it. Relief flooded through me, the warmth of my home, the familiar scent of my space. It should have been comforting, it wasn't. Orion stood at the door, staring at it. His ears were stiff, his breathing slow and controlled. He wasn't barking anymore. That scared me even more. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. "It's fine, it's over, I just needed to sleep." I turned away from the door. Then a knock. I froze. Not a loud knock, not demanding, just soft, slow, like someone was waiting. I turned my head slowly, my breath hitching in my throat. Orion growled this time, the deep sound vibrating through the room. His fur bristled, his teeth bared. The knock came again, 3 slow, deliberate taps. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. The air in the room felt heavier, like the walls themselves were pressing in. I didn't check the peephole. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, my body frozen, every nerve on high alert. Orion's growl faded. He took a slow step back from the door. That's when I knew. Whatever was outside was still there, waiting. I yanked on Orion's leash, turned and ran. For a long moment, I didn't move. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body had locked up, paralyzed by the unknown. The only sound in the room was Orion's slow, heavy breathing. His eyes never left the door. His body was tense, ready. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination. Maybe a branch hitting the door, maybe the wind. But I knew better. That knock wasn't random. It wasn't an accident. Someone or something wanted me to know they were there. A step too far, seconds felt like hours. My fingers hovered over my phone, debating whether to call someone. But what would I even say? "Hey, I think a shadow is following me." I ran home, and now something is knocking at my door. They'd laugh, tell me I was tired, that I was seeing things. But Orion saw it too, and he wasn't laughing. I took a shaky breath and slowly backed away from the door. If I just ignored it, maybe it would go away. Then, bang! Not a knock this time. A loud, deliberate bang. Orion barked, loud, sharp, aggressive. His stance changed, his body positioned between me and the door. The message was clear. He was protecting me. I felt a lump rise in my throat. The air in the room felt colder, like something unseen had slipped in through the cracks. My instinct screamed at me to do something, but what? Call someone, run, hide. I took a deep breath. I needed to know what was out there. Slowly I crept toward the peephole. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs. My fingers trembled as I reached for the door. Every step closer felt like stepping towards something I shouldn't. And then, finally, I looked. The empty street, or so I thought. Nothing. The porch was empty. The street was deserted. The wind barely moved the trees. A cold chill ran down my spine. My gut told me something was still there, watching, waiting. I scanned the street. The houses around mine were dark. Everyone was asleep. Everyone but me. That's when I saw it. Not on the porch, not by the street, but further down the sidewalk, standing under the streetlight. The same shadowy figure from the park. Tall. Still. Too still. It didn't move. It didn't flinch. It was just there. I stepped back from the peephole, my breath caught in my throat, my skin prickled with a deep, gut-wrenching fear. It had followed me, all the way home. I turned to Orion. His fur was still bristled, his teeth still bared. He saw it too, which meant it was real. And then, my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. My hands fumbled as I grabbed it from the table. A message from an unknown number. I stared at the screen, my fingers shaking as I opened it. "Why did you run?" My throat went dry. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. A message. From who? From it? Number. That was impossible. It had to be a prank. A coincidence. Then, as I stood there, my phone buzzed again. A picture. My porch. From outside my house. Nowhere left to run. I nearly dropped the phone. My breathing came in sharp, shallow gasps. This was real. Too real. I turned back to the peephole, my heart hammering in my chest. The figure under the streetlight? Gone. Panic surged through me like wildfire. Where was it? Orion barked again, this time at the back door. A sickening realization hit me. It wasn't at the front anymore. It was behind the house. I spun around, every nerve in my body on high alert. The back door had no peephole, no way to see what was on the other side. Just a thin wooden barrier between me and whatever was out there. Orion's barking grew louder, more frantic. His claws scratched against the floor. His body was rigid, tail stiff. Then, click. The doorknob turned. Once. Twice. Slow. Testing. I stepped back, my chest heaving. My mind screamed at me to do something, but fear had me frozen. Then came the whisper. Not through a text, this time not from a distance, but from just outside the door. "You left something behind." I gasped. My entire body shuddered. I didn't care what was happening anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands trembled so much I almost dropped it. The ringing felt endless. Finally, a voice. "911, what's your emergency?" I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, but before I could, the knocking stopped. The air around me changed, like a storm had passed but left the damage behind. I turned to Orion. His tail was still stiff, but his growling had stopped. His ears twitched, still alert. But whatever had been there, it was gone. For now. I took a deep, shaking breath. Then I heard something that sent my stomach dropping. A soft chime. Another text. I swallowed hard and looked down at my phone. One new message. "See you soon." For a long moment I just stood there, my phone gripped so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The message glowed on the screen. "See you soon." My hands felt numb. My throat was dry. Every part of me wanted to believe this was a prank, some cruel joke. But deep down I knew it wasn't. Orion stood near the back door, his body still tense. His ears twitched, listening, waiting. I forced myself to move. I stepped away from the door, my legs heavy, my breath shaky. I needed to think. I glanced at the clock, 2:56 a.m. The house was silent except for Orion's soft breathing. The outside world, the wind, the trees, everything had gone still, like the night itself was holding its breath. I checked the locks on every door, front door locked, Back door locked. Windows shut tight. Still, it didn't feel safe, because I knew, whatever was out there, it wasn't done with me yet. A sound in the dark. I forced myself to sit down, trying to steady my breathing. My phone was still in my hands, the screen dark now. I could call someone. The police? A friend? But what would I even say? That someone was watching me? That they followed me home and sent me messages? That something wasn't human? Would anyone believe me? I ran a hand over my face, my skin cold, despite the sweat on my forehead. Then a sound, a creak, not from outside, inside. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. I sat up, every nerve on high alert. Orion's ears perked. His head turned toward the hallway. Another creak, closer this time. I slowly rose to my feet. The air in the house felt heavier, thicker, like something was pressing down on me. I moved toward the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. My footsteps were silent, careful. Orion followed close behind me. His tail was low, his body tense. As I turned the corner into the hallway, I stopped. My bedroom door, which I had left open, was now closed. A sharp chill crawled up my spine. I knew for a fact I hadn't shut it. My fingers curled into fists. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to get out of the house. But my feet wouldn't move. Then, a soft knock. From inside my room, my breath hitched. Orion let out a low, warning growl. I didn't move. I barely even breathed. Another knock, slow, gentle, like whoever was inside knew I was listening. Do I open the door? I swallowed the lump in my throat. My body was torn between two thoughts. Open the door or run? Orion stood beside me, his muscles tight, his breath slow and measured. He wasn't barking. That scared me more. I lifted a trembling hand and reached for the doorknob. My fingers hovered over it. Then a whisper from inside my room. "Come in." I jerked my hand back. A cold wave of terror crashed over me. My stomach twisted. My skin burned with goosebumps. Number no, no, no. I turned on my heels and ran. I didn't think. I just ran. Orion sprinted with me as I grabbed my keys and yanked the front door open. The second I stepped outside, the air felt lighter, like I had just escaped a suffocating grip. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, nearly dropping them. Orion barked as I threw open the door and climbed in. He jumped into the passenger seat, his body tense but his breathing heavy. I slammed the doors shut and locked them. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my pulse erratic. Then, slowly, I turned to look at the house. The lights were still on. The front door stood wide open. The hallway was visible from where I sat. And in the darkness of my bedroom doorway, a figure stood there, not moving, not blinking, just watching. I couldn't see its face, couldn't tell if it was even human. Then my phone buzzed again. With shaky hands, I lifted it to my face. One new message. "Running won't help." I dropped the phone, my entire body went numb. And then, the figure in my house tilted its head, like it was smiling. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The figure stood in my house, shadowed in the doorway of my bedroom. It didn't step forward. It didn't disappear. It just watched. Orion let out a low, uneasy growl, but he wasn't barking anymore. He was waiting, just like it was. My phone sat in my lap, the screen still glowing. "Running won't help." The words sent a cold shudder through my entire body. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breathing was erratic, my chest rising and falling too fast. Every part of me screamed to start the car, to drive as far away as possible. But I didn't, because I knew. If I ran, it would follow. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to think. I looked back at the house. The figure hadn't moved. But I felt something deep, something wrong. It wasn't just standing there, it was waiting for me to come back. The choice. I gritted my teeth. I had two options. One, leave, drive away and pretend none of this happened. Two, face it. Everything in me wanted to run, to drive until I reached a hotel, a friend's house, anywhere but here. But something told me it wouldn't matter. That text message. Running won't help. That wasn't a threat. It was a fact. I closed my eyes for a second, steadying my breathing. When I opened them, I looked straight at the figure in my house, and I spoke. "What do you want?" My voice was hoarse, shaking, but the words came out. The figure tilted its head again, like it was listening. The air around me grew heavier. Orion pressed himself against me, his body still tense. And then, the lights inside my house flickered. For a brief second, everything went dark. When the lights came back, the figure was gone. Was it over? I didn't move at first. I kept staring at the doorway, expecting it to return. My breathing was shallow, uneven. I listened, waiting for another sound, but the house was silent, completely silent. I forced myself to unlock my phone, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through my messages. Nothing. The last text, "See you soon," was still there, but no new ones, no warnings, no whispers, just silence. I let out a slow, shaky breath. My muscles felt weak, like I had been holding myself together by sheer force of will. Was it gone, or was it just waiting for another time? I glanced at Orion. He was still alert, his gaze locked onto the house, but his growling had stopped. His breathing was calmer. He felt it too. The shift. Whatever had been there, it was gone, for now. The last message. I don't remember how long I sat in the car, staring at the house. It felt empty now, lighter, like something that didn't belong had finally left. Eventually I gathered the courage to step out. Orion stayed close to my side as I approached the front door. It was still wide open, just as I had left it. The inside looked normal. The lights were on, the furniture untouched. No sign that anything had happened at all. But I knew better. I stepped inside cautiously, my heartbeat still uneven. Every step felt wrong, like I was stepping into a place I no longer belonged. Orion sniffed the air, his tail still low, but he wasn't tense anymore. I checked my bedroom. Nothing, no figure, no signs of anyone ever being there. The door was open now. The air felt still. But on my bed, there was something that hadn't been there before. A piece of paper. I swallowed hard, my feet feeling like lead as I approached it. With shaking hands, I picked it up. There were only 4 words written on it. "You brought it back." A cold wave of terror shot through me. Brought what back? My mind raced, replaying every moment of that night. The park, the shadow under the streetlight, the whispers, the feeling of being followed. Had I made a mistake? Had I taken something with me? Or worse, had it chosen me? I dropped the paper, my hands ice cold. I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over, not even close. Some things should be left alone. Some places, some moments are not meant to be disturbed. I thought it was just a walk with my dog. But that night I realized something terrifying. Sometimes when you look into the darkness, it looks back. Watch your steps and don't look back. If you ever felt like you were being watched at night, maybe you were. Stay safe, stay aware, and watch till the end for more stories like this.